Now let's begin. Sean Ferguson stood in the kitchen of his modest suburban home, watching his 16-year-old daughter Mercedes practice her violin through the doorway. The late afternoon sunlight caught the concentration on her face as she worked through a complex passage from Tchaikovsky. She'd been at it for 2 hours, the same 30-second segment, over and over until her fingers bled into the strings with perfect precision. "Dad, does this sound right?" She lowered the bow, her dark hair falling across her face. "Sounds like Carnegie Hall to me, Merce." Sean smiled, returning to the budget spreadsheet on his laptop. Numbers he'd memorized by heart. $127,000 in Mercedes's college fund, built over 16 years through documentary work, freelance journalism, and living below their means. Every dollar accounted for, every sacrifice worth it. His wife, Virginia, walked in, phone pressed to her ear, her expression tense. "Yes, Mom. This Sunday. I know." She ended the call and sighed. "Family dinner at my parents' house. They want to celebrate Cassandra's acceptance to Harvard." Sean's jaw tightened. Virginia's niece, Cassandra, was a decent student with mediocre grades and wealthy parents who'd paid for every advantage. Vincent and his wife Teresa had bought SAT prep courses, hired private tutors, and most likely made a generous donation to Harvard's endowment fund. Meanwhile, Mercedes had earned straight A's, taught herself 3 languages, and volunteered at the Children's Hospital while mastering the violin. "That's great for her," Sean said evenly. "Mercedes has her interview at Juilliard next month." Different paths. Virginia's eyes flickered with something Sean couldn't read. "About that. My mother wants to discuss something important on Sunday. About family investments." The next 3 days passed with an undercurrent of tension. Virginia became distant, spending hours on phone calls with her mother Doris. Conversations that ended abruptly when Sean entered the room. He'd been married to Virginia for 17 years, and he knew the Herrera family playbook. Money talked, and everyone else listened. Sunday arrived with cruel sunshine. The Herrera estate sat in an affluent neighborhood where lawns were measured by acres, not square feet. Felipe Herrera had made his fortune in real estate development, the kind that displaced communities and built luxury condos. Doris had never worked a day in her life, but possessed a PhD in manipulation and entitlement. The dining room gleamed with crystal and silver. 30 relatives packed around the extended table, most of whom Sean barely knew. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all part of the Herrera dynasty, all dressed like they were auditioning for a country club catalog. "Sean, Virginia." Doris air-kissed them at the door, her perfume overwhelming. "And Mercedes, darling, you've grown so tall. Still playing that little fiddle?" Mercedes's smile was polite and cold. "It's a violin, grandmother. A 1890 French-made instrument." "Of course, dear." Doris had already dismissed her, turning to Cassandra, who stood nearby in a Harvard sweatshirt despite it being 75 degrees outside. "Our Harvard girl. We're so proud." Dinner was a performance. Felipe held court at the head of the table, discussing market trends and property values with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong, or never admitted it. Vincent, Virginia's younger brother, matched his father's arrogance, detailing Cassandra's future at Harvard as if she'd already graduated summa cum laude. "Full pre-med track," Vincent announced, gesturing with his wine glass. "She'll be a neurosurgeon, the youngest in the family." Sean cut his steak, saying nothing. Beside him, Mercedes pushed food around her plate, her eyes distant. She'd learned early how these gatherings worked. The Herreras performed, everyone else applauded. After dessert, Doris stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "Family, we have important matters to discuss. Felipe and I have been reviewing our financial portfolio." Sean's instincts, honed from years of investigative journalism, sparked to life. He noticed Virginia wouldn't meet his eyes. "We've encountered some temporary setbacks," Felipe said, his voice tight. "Market corrections, unexpected expenses. Nothing we can't weather, but it requires family unity. Family sacrifice. Cassandra's Harvard tuition is $320,000 for 4 years," Doris continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. "We've covered the first year, but we need to consolidate family resources for the remaining 3. The room fell silent. Sean felt Mercedes tense beside him. "We know Sean and Virginia have been saving for Mercedes's education," Doris said, her eyes locking onto Sean. "But let's be realistic. Cassandra has been accepted to Harvard." "Harvard?" Mercedes can attend community college, then transfer to a state school. She'll still get a degree. Sean's blood turned to ice. Excuse me. Your daughter can go to community college, Felipe said, as if explaining something to a child. Cassandra deserves Harvard more. The return on investment is obvious. A Harvard medical degree versus, what? Music school. Juilliard. Mercedes whispered, her voice barely audible. Exactly. Doris waved her hand dismissively. Playing violin isn't a career, dear. It's a hobby. Cassandra will save lives. Your niece deserves this opportunity more than you do. Sean stood slowly, his chair scraping against hardwood. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to hand over $127,000, money I've saved for 16 years, to pay for Cassandra's tuition because you mismanaged your finances? It's not mismanagement. Felipe's face reddened. It's market volatility. And it's not a request, Sean. It's family obligation. We've helped you over the years. You've helped us. Sean's laugh was bitter. Name one time. We invited you into this family, Doris said coldly. We accepted you despite your humble background. Your father was a factory worker. Your mother cleaned houses. You were nothing before Virginia. Virginia finally looked at him, and Sean saw it. She'd known. She'd known this was coming and said nothing. The answer is no, Sean said quietly. That money is Mercedes's future. I'm not funding your daughter's education because you gambled poorly on real estate investments. Vincent shot to his feet. You ungrateful. Sit down. Sean's voice cut like a blade. He'd interviewed war criminals, exposed corruption, stared down threats that would make Vincent wet himself. I've been polite because of my wife. But I'm done. Mercedes, get your coat. Doris moved faster than Sean expected. She crossed the room and her hand connected with his face, the slap echoing through the dining room. 30 relatives gasped in unison. How dare you disrespect this family, Doris hissed. After everything we've given you. You're nothing but a jumped-up journalist playing at being important. Your daughter will amount to nothing, just like you. Sean's cheek burned, but he didn't touch it. He looked at Virginia, waiting for her to defend him, defend their daughter. She sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, but silent. Mercedes, Sean said calmly. We're leaving. His daughter stood, her face composed but her hands shaking. She looked at her grandmother, then her mother, then the entire room of relatives who sat in silence, complicit. For 16 years, my father worked 70-hour weeks, Mercedes said, her voice steady and clear. He missed sleep. He missed vacations. He ate ramen for dinner so I could have music lessons. He saved every penny while you all took luxury cruises and bought summer homes. And you think you can just take it because Cassandra's too mediocre to earn a scholarship? Mercedes, Virginia reached for her. Don't. Mercedes stepped back. You knew. You knew they'd ask this, and you said nothing. You let us walk into an ambush. Sean placed his hand on Mercedes's shoulder. We're done here. They walked out through the silent dining room, past the crystal and silver, past the expensive art on the walls. Sean didn't look back at Virginia. Some betrayals were too clean to forgive. In the car, Mercedes finally broke. Tears poured down her face as Sean drove them away from the Herrera estate. They think I'm nothing, she sobbed. They think music is nothing. They're wrong. Sean's hands gripped the steering wheel. And we're going to prove it. You and me, Merce. Just like it's always been. He didn't know it then, but that night marked the beginning of something larger than revenge. It marked the moment Sean Ferguson stopped playing by other people's rules and started writing his own story, one that would eventually destroy the Herreras more thoroughly than they could imagine. The apartment Sean rented was a third the size of their previous house, but it was theirs. Virginia had chosen her family, filing for divorce 3 weeks after the dinner. She'd cried, claimed she loved them both, but couldn't defy her parents. Sean had signed the papers without argument, relieved more than heartbroken. It's cozy, Mercedes said, standing in the small living room that doubled as Sean's office. Her violin case sat in the corner, a sanctuary in the chaos. It's temporary. Sean assembled a cheap bookshelf from the hardware store. I've got 3 documentary contracts lined up. We'll be fine. The divorce settlement was brutal. Virginia's lawyers, paid for by Felipe, fought for half the college fund. Sean's attorney, a public defender working pro bono, managed to protect most of it by proving Sean had funded the account exclusively through his income. Virginia's contributions had been minimal at best. Still, the legal fees hurt. Sean burned through $15,000 fighting for what he'd already earned. The college fund sat at $112,000 when the dust settled. Enough for Juilliard if Mercedes got accepted, but not enough for comfort. Late at night, after Mercedes was asleep, Sean sat at his laptop researching. Not college costs or financial planning. Those numbers were branded into his brain. He researched the Herreras. Old habits from his investigative journalism days kicked in automatically. What he found was fascinating. Felipe's real estate empire was crumbling faster than he'd admitted at the family dinner. 3 luxury developments had stalled due to zoning issues and environmental protests. Sean recognized the projects. He'd done a documentary 5 years ago on gentrification, featuring one of Felipe's developments that displaced a historic Latino neighborhood. The Herreras weren't experiencing market corrections. They were hemorrhaging money from lawsuits, failed investments, and Felipe's gambling addiction that Doris had expertly hidden for decades. Sean bookmarked articles, saved screenshots, built a digital file. He wasn't sure why, wasn't sure what he'd do with the information. But knowledge was power, and he'd learned long ago that the powerful feared exposure more than anything. Mercedes's Juilliard interview was in 6 weeks. Sean threw everything into preparing her. He hired a violin instructor, a retired concertmaster who charged $200 per session, but was worth every penny. Mercedes practiced until her fingers bled, then practiced some more. "Tell me about your relationship with music," Sean asked one evening, filming her on his camera. He'd decided to document her journey, raw footage that might never see an audience but existed as proof of her dedication. Mercedes lowered her bow, thinking, "Music is the only language that doesn't lie. When I play, I'm not trying to impress anyone or prove anything. I'm just communicating truth." Sean smiled behind the camera. "That's beautiful, Merce." "Dad," she hesitated. "Do you hate Mom?" The question caught him off guard. He stopped recording, considered lying, decided against it. "No, I'm disappointed. There's a difference. She called yesterday, asked me to convince you to help Cassandra." Sean's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" I hung up. Mercedes's eyes were old beyond her years. "She chose them. She doesn't get to choose us now." 2 weeks before the Juilliard interview, Sean's phone rang at midnight. He almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed Vincent's number. Curiosity won out. "What, Sean?" Vincent's voice was slurred, drunk. "You need to help us. Dad lost everything. The bank's foreclosing on the estate. Cassandra can't go to Harvard. You have to give us the money." "No. She'll kill herself." Vincent's voice cracked. "Cassandra says she'll kill herself if she can't go to Harvard. You'd have that on your conscience. A young girl's death." Sean felt something cold settle in his chest. "That's emotional manipulation, Vincent. If Cassandra is genuinely suicidal, get her professional help. But don't weaponize mental health to extort money from me. You bastard." Sean hung up. He didn't block the number. He wanted to know what was coming. Virginia called next, sobbing about family duty and how Sean was destroying Cassandra's future. Then Doris, her voice dripping venom, threatening to turn Mercedes against him, to reveal truths about Sean's past. He recorded everything. The Juilliard interview took place in a concert hall in Manhattan. Mercedes wore a simple black dress, her violin in hand, her face composed. Sean sat in the waiting area with a dozen other anxious parents, all of them dressed better, looking wealthier, carrying the confidence of people who'd never had to choose between groceries and opportunity. When Mercedes emerged 2 hours later, her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "I played the Tchaikovsky piece," she said, "the one I've been working on, and they asked me to improvise. So I did, and they said they'd let us know in 3 weeks." Sean pulled her into a hug. "You did your best. That's all that matters." That night, back in their small apartment, Sean's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photo, Mercedes leaving the Juilliard building, with a caption, "Dream big, sweetie. Some people aren't meant for greatness." The number belonged to Cassandra. Sean looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully on the couch with a book on her chest. He thought about the Herreras, their cruelty, their entitlement. He thought about the files he'd been building, the evidence of their corruption and collapse. And he thought about the documentary he'd been planning for months, the one about family dynamics and financial abuse, the one that would need real subjects, real stories. Some revenge was served cold. Sean Ferguson's would be served with cameras rolling and the whole world watching. 3 weeks crawled by like 3 years. Sean took every freelance job he could find, corporate videos, wedding films, local news segments. Anything that paid. Mercedes worked part-time at a coffee shop near the apartment, coming home exhausted but never complaining. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Mercedes stood at the mailbox, the envelope in her hands, unable to open it. "You want me to do it?" Sean asked. She shook her head, took a breath, and tore it open. Her eyes scanned the page once, twice. Then she looked up at Sean with tears streaming down her face. "I got in. Full scholarship for the first year, partial for the remaining 3. They want me, Dad. Juilliard wants me." Sean swept her into his arms, his own eyes burning. "I never doubted it. Not for a second." That night, they celebrated with cheap Chinese takeout and sparkling cider. Mercedes called 3 friends, screaming into the phone about her acceptance. Sean posted nothing on social media. He'd learned that lesson. The Herreras monitored everything. But word spread anyway. The classical music community was small, and Juilliard acceptances were prestigious. Within a week, a local newspaper ran a feature on Mercedes. Local teen earns Juilliard scholarship despite family hardships. The article was tasteful, mentioning only that Mercedes came from a single-parent household and had overcome financial obstacles. But Sean knew what it would do to the Herreras, who valued appearance above all else. Virginia called within hours of the article's publication. "You turned our daughter into a charity case," she hissed. "My parents are humiliated. Everyone's asking why we didn't support her." "Because you didn't," Sean said calmly. "You chose Cassandra. Live with it. She's still my daughter. Then you should have acted like her mother." Sean hung up and blocked her number. Mercedes had already blocked Virginia months ago. What Sean didn't tell Mercedes was that his documentary project was moving forward faster than expected. He'd pitched it to a major streaming platform. The price of privilege, an examination of wealth, family dysfunction, and the cost of keeping up appearances. They'd bitten immediately, offering a budget that made Sean's head spin. He'd spent months interviewing families torn apart by financial entitlement, parents who sacrificed their children for status, children damaged by impossible expectations. The Herreras fit perfectly, but Sean needed their story to reach critical mass first. Mercedes started at Juilliard in September. Sean drove her to campus with everything she owned packed into his aging Honda. The school was magnificent, historic buildings, practice rooms with acoustics that made her violin sing, classmates from around the world who spoke music as their first language. "You belong here," Sean said as they unloaded boxes into her dorm room. "I'm terrified," Mercedes admitted. "Everyone's so talented. So are you. The difference is, you've earned it through blood and tears. They'll see that." Sean drove back to the apartment alone, the silence heavy. He'd devoted 16 years to raising Mercedes, and now she was launched into the world. Pride mixed with grief, the bittersweet cocktail of every parent watching their child leave. He threw himself into the documentary. Hours of footage, interviews with psychologists, financial advisors, family therapists. He built a narrative arc about American families destroyed by wealth worship and ego. And he waited. The Herreras continued their collapse in slow motion. Felipe lost the estate to foreclosure. Sean saw the public records. They moved into a smaller house, then a condo, each step down publicized in local real estate news. Cassandra enrolled in the state university, not Harvard, on student loans that would crush her for decades. Vincent's wife Teresa filed for divorce, citing financial deception. The settlement left Vincent with nothing. Doris took a job, her first in 40 years, as a receptionist at a dental office. The humiliation must have been exquisite. Sean documented it all, not directly, but through public records, news articles, social media posts that the Herreras themselves made while pretending everything was fine. The documentary didn't name them explicitly, but anyone who knew them would recognize the story. Mercedes thrived at Juilliard. She called Sean every Sunday, voice bright with stories about her classes, her practice sessions, her growing confidence. By winter break, she'd been selected for a prestigious chamber ensemble that performed at Lincoln Center. "There's a talent showcase in April," Mercedes said during one call. "Major donors, industry professionals, media coverage. They're selecting 10 students to perform original compositions. I'm working on something different." "Different how?" "You'll see." Sean suspected she was up to something, but trusted her instincts. Mercedes had always been mature beyond her years, sharpened by the Herrera's cruelty into someone stronger than they could imagine. In March, Sean received an email from the streaming platform. The Price of Privilege had been selected as a featured documentary for their summer lineup. They wanted to do a press tour, interviews, possibly a panel discussion about family wealth and dysfunction. The premiere was scheduled for June, 1 year after the Herrera family dinner that changed everything. Sean sat in his apartment, staring at the email, and smiled. Not a happy smile, something darker, more satisfied. His phone rang. Mercedes. Dad, I need to tell you something about my showcase piece. I'm listening. I composed a violin concerto, 12 minutes long. It's called Inheritance. She paused. It's about everything that happened. The dinner, the slap, the divorce. I'm performing it with video projections, photos, documents, everything. The Juilliard faculty approved it as a multimedia piece. Sean's heart raced. Mercedes, are you sure? This will burn every bridge with your mother's family. Good. Her voice was steel. They burned us first. I'm just playing the violin while they burn. The showcase was April 20th. Sean's documentary premiered June 15th. The timing was almost poetic. I'm proud of you, Sean said quietly. Not because you're getting revenge, but because you're turning pain into art. That takes courage. I learned from you, Dad. You taught me that truth matters more than comfort. After they hung up, Sean opened his documentary files and began the final edits. The Herreras had created their own downfall through greed and cruelty. He and Mercedes were simply making sure everyone knew it. Some children were raised to maintain their parents' legacies. Mercedes Ferguson was raised to destroy the people who underestimated her. And she was about to succeed spectacularly. April 20th arrived with unseasonable cold. Sean caught the train to Manhattan wearing his only suit, a garment bag slung over his shoulder containing the dress shirt Mercedes had insisted he buy for the occasion. The showcase took place in Juilliard's Paul Hall, a concert venue that seated 277 people. Every seat was filled. Industry professionals, donors, faculty members, and families packed the space. Sean spotted agents, record label executives, and at least 2 people he recognized from major symphony orchestras. What he didn't expect was seeing Virginia Herrera Ferguson in the 3rd row. She looked diminished somehow, wearing an expensive dress that no longer fit quite right, her makeup expertly applied but unable to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Beside her sat Doris and Felipe, the latter in a suit that had seen better days. Vincent was absent, probably couldn't afford the train ticket. Mercedes hadn't told Sean they were coming. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she did. The showcase began with a piano prodigy, then a cellist, then a soprano whose voice could shatter crystal. Each performance was extraordinary. Sean barely registered them, his focus on Mercedes, who sat backstage preparing for her piece. Finally, the announcer's voice. Mercedes Ferguson, performing her original composition, Inheritance. The lights dimmed. Mercedes walked onto the stage in a crimson dress, her violin gleaming under the spotlights. She didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the applause. She simply raised her instrument and began to play. The first notes were delicate, almost fragile, a child's melody, innocent and hopeful. Behind her, a screen flickered to life, showing images, a little girl with a violin, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Sean recognized the photos from their family albums, from before everything fell apart. Then the music shifted. The melody turned aggressive, discordant. The screen showed new images, the Herrera estate, luxury cars, designer shopping bags. Photos from Virginia's social media, images of excess and waste. Mercedes's violin screamed now, the bow attacking the strings. The audience sat transfixed, some leaning forward in their seats. A photo appeared on screen, the family dinner, taken by someone before the confrontation. 30 people around a table, glasses raised, smiles fixed. The music became chaotic, violent. Then silence. Mercedes lowered her violin and spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and unwavering. This piece is called Inheritance. It's about what we're given by our families and what we choose to keep. She raised her bow again. This final movement is called Emancipation. The music that followed was unlike anything Sean had ever heard. It was triumph and sorrow blended together, a melody that built and built until the entire hall seemed to vibrate with it. The screen showed Mercedes now, practicing until her fingers bled, working at the coffee shop, studying in the apartment, walking onto Juilliard's campus for the first time. The final image was a close-up of Sean and Mercedes, taken on move-in day, both of them smiling despite their exhaustion. The last note hung in the air like a prayer. Then Mercedes lowered her violin and the lights came up. The audience erupted. Standing ovation, applause that echoed off the walls. Sean saw agents on their phones immediately, saw faculty members exchanging significant glances. This wasn't just a good performance. This was a career-launching moment. Sean looked at Virginia. She was weeping openly, her hands covering her face. Doris sat rigid, her expression murderous. Felipe had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tight Sean thought it might shatter. After the showcase, a reception in the lobby. Industry professionals swarmed Mercedes, offering business cards, talking about recording contracts and performance opportunities. Sean hung back, letting her navigate the attention she'd earned. Virginia approached him, mascara streaking her face. "Sean, please. We need to talk." "No, we don't. She's my daughter. You gave up that right when you chose your parents over her." Sean's voice was quiet but final. "You could have defended us. You chose silence. They're my family. We were your family." Sean turned to walk away, but Virginia grabbed his arm. "My parents lost everything. The house, the money, the reputation. Vincent's wife left him. Cassandra dropped out of college. Everything fell apart." "Good." Sean pulled his arm free. "They built their lives on other people's backs. Let them learn what it's like to have nothing." Doris materialized from the crowd, her face twisted with rage. "You did this. You poisoned her against us." "I told her the truth," Sean said calmly. "You did the rest yourselves." "That performance was a humiliation," Doris hissed. "A public attack on our family. We could sue her for defamation." "Try it." Sean smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Discovery would be fascinating. All your financial records, all your communications, everything made public in court documents. Please, sue my daughter. I'd love to watch." Felipe finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "You've destroyed this family." "No," Mercedes said, appearing beside Sean. She'd removed her performance dress and wore jeans and a sweater, looking younger, but no less formidable. "You destroyed yourselves. I just set it to music." "Mercedes, please." Virginia reached for her daughter. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I should have defended you." 2 years too late, Mercedes said. "I needed a mother that night at dinner. I don't need one now." An agent interrupted, pulling Mercedes aside to discuss a summer concert series. Sean watched his daughter navigate the conversation with confidence, saw the future opening up before her like a flower. The Herreras stood in the lobby, surrounded by celebration but isolated in their misery. Other attendees gave them a wide berth. Word had spread about the performance's real story. The classical music world was small and loved gossip. By tomorrow, everyone would know about the family that demanded a girl give up her dreams for her cousin's mediocrity. Sean felt no triumph, no joy in their suffering. Only a calm satisfaction that justice, however delayed, had arrived. He and Mercedes took the train home together, exhausted but content. "3 agents want to sign me," Mercedes said, her head on Sean's shoulder. 2 recording labels. "And Professor Hartman said Yo-Yo Mom might be interested in a collaboration." "That's incredible, Merce. None of it would have happened without you." She sat up, looking at him seriously. "You sacrificed everything for me." "No," Sean corrected. "I invested everything in you. There's a difference. And the return has been extraordinary." She smiled. Then her expression turned mischievous. "So, when were you going to tell me about the documentary?" Sean's heart skipped. "How did you?" "Dad, I'm not stupid. I've seen you editing footage for months. Plus, someone from the streaming platform called the apartment looking for you, and I may have accidentally seen an email about the premiere. I was going to surprise you. June 15th, right? The price of privilege." Mercedes grinned. "I want front row seats to watch them squirm." Sean laughed, realizing his daughter was far more like him than he'd ever intended. "It's going to be brutal." "Good," Mercedes said, echoing his earlier words. They earned it. The train rattled through the darkness, carrying them home to their small apartment, to the life they'd built from scratch. Behind them, the Herreras picked up the pieces of their shattered legacy. Ahead, Mercedes's career stretched bright, with possibility. Inheritance, Sean thought, wasn't just about money. It was about values, resilience, the ability to create something from nothing. The Herreras had given Mercedes nothing but pain. Sean had given her everything that mattered: belief, support, and the courage to succeed on her own terms. In the end, that inheritance proved worth more than all the Herrera money combined. The 2 months between Mercedes' showcase and Sean's documentary premiere passed in a whirlwind. Mercedes signed with an agent who immediately booked her for summer festival performances across Europe. She'd leave for Germany the day after Sean's premiere, a graduation gift to herself before her sophomore year at Juilliard. Sean finalized the documentary in marathon editing sessions, polishing every frame until it gleamed with truth. The streaming platform's marketing team went aggressive, promoting it as the most unflinching examination of American wealth worship since the Queen of Versailles. Virginia called Sean 3 times, leaving voicemails he never returned. Doris sent a certified letter threatening legal action over Mercedes' performance, claiming defamation and emotional distress. Sean forwarded it to his attorney with a note: "Add this to the file." The attorney called back within an hour, laughing. "They have no case. The performance was artistic expression protected by the First Amendment. Tell them to pound sand." Sean sent a polite reply through his attorney. Ms. Herrera's performance consisted of original music and personal photographs. No defamatory statements were made. Further frivolous legal threats will be documented as harassment. Doris didn't write back. The real surprise came from Cassandra herself. She reached out to Mercedes via Instagram DM, a message that Mercedes showed Sean one evening. "I'm sorry for what my family did. They pushed me into Harvard, pushed me into pre-med, pushed me into being something I'm not. I dropped out because I was miserable. I'm working retail now and actually happy for the first time in my life. Your performance helped me realize I was as trapped as you were. Different prison, same guards. I hope we can talk someday." Mercedes stared at the message for a long time. "What should I say?" "What do you want to say?" Sean asked. "That I don't forgive her family, but I understand her pain. That I hope she finds her own path." "Then say that." Mercedes typed a brief response. "I'm glad you got out. Keep walking forward, not back." Cassandra replied with a simple heart emoji. On June 14th, the night before the premiere, Sean couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment, reviewing the documentary in his mind, second-guessing every edit. At 3 a.m., Mercedes emerged from her room, still packed for her European tour. "You okay, Dad?" "Nervous. What if it's not good enough? What if I'm just a vindictive ex-husband exploiting our pain for entertainment?" Mercedes sat beside him on the couch. "Is that what you think you did?" "I don't know anymore. I watched the rough cut you left on your laptop," Mercedes admitted. "I know I wasn't supposed to, but I needed to see it." Sean's breath caught. "And it's brilliant. And it's not about revenge. It's about exposing systems that hurt people. The Herreras are just one example among dozens. You interviewed other families, other situations. You made something universal from something personal. But our story is the centerpiece. Because it's the most dramatic. But you never name them, never show their faces. You let their actions speak for themselves." Mercedes took his hand. "Dad, you taught me that art transforms pain into meaning. That's what your documentary does. Own it." The premiere screening took place at a theater in Brooklyn, invitation only for press, industry professionals, and platform executives. Sean wore the new suit Mercedes had insisted on buying him as a thank you gift. She looked stunning in a designer dress, borrowed from a fellow Juilliard student. They arrived to camera flashes and interview requests. Entertainment reporters wanted quotes, film critics wanted insights, social media influencers wanted content. Sean handled it with practiced ease, years of journalism training kicking in. "What inspired this documentary?" a reporter asked. "The belief that family should build you up, not tear you down," Sean replied. "And the cost when that doesn't happen." Inside the theater, Sean spotted familiar faces, colleagues from his journalism days, documentarians he admired, executives from major production companies. The platform had spared no expense promoting the film. What Sean didn't expect was seeing Vincent Herrera slouched in a back row seat. Mercedes saw him too and tensed. "Should we get security?" "No," Sean said quietly. "Let him watch. He needs to see this." The lights dimmed. The documentary began with a montage of American families at their best: graduations, weddings, celebrations. Then the narrator's voice, calm and analytical. But what happens when family becomes a transaction? When love is conditional on status, money, or achievement? The next 90 minutes were devastating. Sean had structured the film in 3 acts. The setup, examining families where wealth created impossible expectations. The breakdown, showing what happened when family members failed to meet those standards. The aftermath, documenting the long-term damage. The Herrera story, though never named explicitly, threaded through all 3 acts. Sean had used Mercedes's childhood photos with her face blurred for privacy, police reports from domestic incidents in wealthy neighborhoods, financial records obtained through public information requests showing the Herrera real estate empire's collapse. He interviewed psychologists who explained narcissistic family systems, financial advisors who detailed how generational wealth often destroyed rather than helped families, and adult children estranged from wealthy parents who shared heartbreaking stories. The most powerful segment featured Sean himself, speaking directly to camera. "I was raised working class. My father worked in a factory, my mother cleaned houses. We had nothing by wealthy standards, but we had something money couldn't buy: unconditional love. When I married into wealth, I discovered that everything had a price, including family bonds. The question became, what was I willing to pay?" The camera cut to Mercedes performing at her showcase, the Inheritance Concerto in full. Sean had licensed the performance footage directly from Juilliard, and it was devastating in its honesty. The final segment showed families who had broken free. Children who walked away from inheritance to build their own lives. Parents who rejected wealth worship to focus on authentic relationships. The message was clear: freedom was possible, but it required courage. The documentary ended with a simple title card: "Inheritance is what we receive. Legacy is what we create." The lights came up. The theater was silent for 3 heartbeats, then erupted in applause. Sean felt Mercedes grip his hand tightly, her eyes shining with tears. The Q&A session afterward was intense. Critics praised the film's unflinching honesty, its refusal to provide easy answers. Entertainment executives discussed distribution opportunities, potential awards consideration, impact on public discourse about wealth and family. Sean answered questions on autopilot, his attention drawn to Vincent, who hadn't moved from his back row seat. When the Q&A ended and people began filing out, Vincent approached. "Can we talk?" he asked, looking diminished. Outside, Sean glanced at Mercedes, who nodded. They followed Vincent to the street, where the summer night was warm and heavy. "I watched your film," Vincent said unnecessarily. "I saw my family in every frame, even though you never named us." "That was intentional," Sean replied. "I know." Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sean recognized from years of family dinners. "I came to apologize. Not to make excuses, but to apologize." "For what, specifically?" Sean kept his voice neutral. "For everything. The dinner, the demands, letting my mother slap you and saying nothing. For calling you drunk and threatening you with Cassandra's suicide." Vincent's voice cracked. "For being complicit in a system that destroyed everyone it touched, including my own daughter." Mercedes spoke for the first time. "Is Cassandra really okay? She's working at Starbucks and taking community college classes in graphic design. She's happy, happier than I ever was at her age." Vincent looked at Mercedes directly. "Your performance, your success, it showed her another way. She realized she didn't have to live my parents' dreams." "And you?" Sean asked. "Divorced. Broke. Living in a studio apartment and working construction." Vincent smiled without humor. "Everything I was raised to avoid. And I've never slept better." Sean studied him, looking for manipulation, for angles. He found only exhaustion and something that might be genuine regret. "I'm not looking for forgiveness," Vincent continued. "I know what we did is unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that your documentary, Mercedes's performance, they didn't destroy my family. They revealed what was already there. The rot we'd been ignoring for generations." "What about your parents?" Mercedes asked. "Haven't spoken to them in 4 months. My mother called me a failure for losing Teresa and my job. I finally told her the truth, that she'd been calling me a failure my entire life, and I was done pretending otherwise." Vincent pulled out his phone, showed them a photo. Cassandra smiling in a Starbucks uniform, holding a latte with an elaborate design. "She made this. She's good at it. Maybe she'll own a coffee shop someday, or become a professional barista, or go into graphic design." I don't care as long as she's happy. That's called being a parent, Sean said quietly. Took you long enough to figure it out. Yeah. Vincent pocketed his phone. Well, I wanted to say that. I'll leave you alone now. He walked away into the Brooklyn night, shoulders hunched but steps steady. Sean and Mercedes watched him go. Do you believe him? Mercedes asked. I think he believes himself right now. Whether it lasts. Sean shrugged. That's his journey, not ours. They returned to the theater for the after-party, where producers and distributors circled Sean with offers and opportunities. The documentary was already generating buzz on social media, trending on multiple platforms. Critics were calling it essential viewing, a cultural touchstone. At midnight, Sean and Mercedes escaped to a quiet diner near their apartment. They sat in a booth, sharing pie and coffee, exhausted but satisfied. 2 years ago, we were in that dining room, Mercedes said, stirring her coffee absently. Grandmother slapped you. We walked out with nothing but each other. Best decision I ever made, Sean said. You know what's funny? They wanted to take my future to preserve theirs. But they destroyed their own future trying. Greed does that. It eats from the inside. Mercedes's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her eyes widened. Oh my God. What? The New York Times wants to interview me. Tomorrow morning. About the performance and the documentary, and she kept scrolling. And my European tour and my career, and they want to know if I'll write a first-person essay about family estrangement and artistic expression. You should do it, Sean said immediately. You think? Mercedes, you've lived through something most people can't imagine. You survived, thrived, turned pain into art. If you can help even one person dealing with toxic family dynamics, it's worth sharing your story. She bit her lip, considering. What if Mom sees it? She'll see it. The Herrera's will all see it. They'll recognize themselves in every word, even if you don't name them. Sean leaned forward. But this isn't about them anymore. It stopped being about them the moment you walked onto that stage. This is about you owning your narrative. Mercedes nodded slowly, then texted back. Yes. Interview confirmed for 10 a.m. They finished their pie in comfortable silence. Outside, New York City hummed with late-night energy, taxis honking, people laughing, the eternal rhythm of a place that never slept and never forgot. Sean's phone buzzed. An email from the streaming platform, preliminary viewing numbers for the documentary's first 6 hours. Over 2 million streams already, with projections suggesting 10 million in the first week. The email continued. Early social media analysis shows massive engagement, particularly from people sharing their own toxic family experiences. You've started a conversation. Well done. Sean showed Mercedes the email. She read it and smiled. Grandmother must be losing her mind. Probably, Sean agreed. But that's not why we did this. No, Mercedes said. We did it because the truth matters more than comfort. You have been listening to me. They paid the bill and walked home through the quiet streets, father and daughter, survivors of a battle they'd won not through violence, but through excellence. The Herrera's had tried to break them. Instead, they'd forged them into something stronger. Tomorrow, Mercedes would give her interview. Next week, she'd fly to Europe for her tour. In the fall, she'd return to Juilliard for her sophomore year. And the Herrera's would watch it all from the ruins of their collapsed empire, finally understanding what they'd lost when they chose money over love. Some lessons cost everything to learn. The Herrera's were just beginning to pay tuition. The New York Times interview happened in a cafe near Juilliard, conducted by a culture reporter named Ada Mullen who specialized in arts and family dynamics. Mercedes arrived precisely on time, wearing jeans and a blazer, her violin case slung over her shoulder. Sean had offered to come, but Mercedes refused. This is my story to tell, Dad. I need to do it alone. He waited in the apartment, pacing, checking his phone every 3 minutes until Mercedes texted, all done. Coming home. She walked in 2 hours later, looking drained but exhilarated. I told her everything. The dinner, the slap, the divorce, the showcase. She recorded the whole thing. How do you feel? Terrified. Relieved. Powerful. Mercedes collapsed on the couch. She asked if I worried about my mother's family seeing it. I said they should see it. They should know exactly what they did. The article published 3 days later, timed to coincide with the documentary's growing popularity. The headline, How One Violinist Turned Family Betrayal into Art, and started a movement. Ada Mullen had crafted the piece brilliantly. She'd interwoven Mercedes' story with broader research on family estrangement, toxic wealth dynamics, and the rise of young adults rejecting traditional family obligations in favor of chosen family and authentic relationships. Mercedes' quotes were devastating in their honesty. "My grandmother told me I'd amount to nothing. She slapped my father in front of 30 relatives for refusing to give away my college fund. 2 years later, I'm at Juilliard on scholarship with a European tour booked. I didn't succeed to prove her wrong. I succeeded because my father believed in me when nobody else did." The article went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been shared over 100,000 times. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of family dysfunction, of choosing self-preservation over toxic relationships. Sean's documentary viewership exploded. By the end of the week, it had reached 15 million streams. The platform ordered a follow-up series, and 3 major studios reached out about adaptation rights for a scripted film. The cultural conversation shifted. Therapists appeared on morning shows discussing family estrangement as a valid choice, not a failure. Financial advisors talked about protecting children from predatory relatives. Even politicians began discussing legislation around financial elder abuse, though the harassed victims were their children, not their parents. Virginia broke her silence with a Facebook post that was quickly screenshot and circulated. "I made terrible mistakes as a mother and wife. I chose my parents' approval over my daughter's future and my husband's dignity. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand how I let this happen. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want Mercedes and Sean to know I see now what I couldn't see then. I'm sorry." Sean showed the post to Mercedes. She read it without expression. "Too little, too late." "Probably," Sean agreed. "But she's trying. She's sorry she got caught. Sorry the whole world knows she's a bad mother. That's not the same as being sorry for what she did." Sean couldn't argue with that logic. Doris and Felipe made no public statements, but their neighbors did. Local news in their town ran a story about the documentary family living in their midst. Former friends gave interviews describing the Herrera's fall from grace. The foreclosure, the bankruptcy, Felipe's gambling debts, Doris's desperate attempts to maintain appearances while working minimum wage. One neighbor said, "They had everything and threw it away because they couldn't accept that their granddaughter wanted to play violin instead of being a doctor." What kind of people do that? The court of public opinion delivered its verdict. Guilty of cruelty, sentenced to irrelevance. On June 20th, Mercedes left for her European tour. Sean drove her to JFK, helping her navigate 3 suitcases and her precious violin. At security, she hugged him fiercely. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she whispered. "You did all the hard work. I just made sure you had the chance." "That's everything, Dad. The chance is everything." She disappeared through security, waving one last time before she was swallowed by the crowd. Sean drove home alone, the car too quiet, the apartment too empty. But his phone was full of messages. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, consulting offers from other families navigating similar dynamics. The documentary had struck a nerve, and people wanted guidance. Sean spent the summer developing a workshop series for estranged adult children, partnering with therapists to create resources for people cutting ties with toxic families. He appeared on podcasts, wrote articles, became an unexpected advocate for family estrangement as a legitimate choice. Mercedes sent photos from Prague, from Vienna, from Berlin. Concert halls, standing ovations, meetings with famous conductors. Her career was launching faster than anyone had predicted, built on talent and the compelling story behind it. In late July, Sean received a letter. Handwritten, no return address, postmarked from the town where the Herreras lived. He opened it carefully, half expecting more threats. Instead, he found a letter from Felipe. "Sean, I'm writing because Doris won't, and Virginia can't find the words. We destroyed everything. Our family, our reputation, our future. I gambled away our wealth trying to maintain a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Doris enabled me, and together we raised children who valued appearance over substance. When we demanded your daughter's college fund, we weren't thinking about Cassandra's future. We were thinking about our pride. We couldn't admit we'd failed financially, so we tried to take from you. Your documentary showed me something I'd been refusing to see, that I built my entire life on exploitation. The developments I built displaced families. The wealth I accumulated came from other people's labor. And when it all collapsed, I tried to exploit my own family. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for truth. Did we really destroy everything? Or was it already destroyed, and you just showed us the rubble? Felipe. Sean read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for angles. He found only something that might be genuine self-reflection. He didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. Felipe wanted absolution, wanted Sean to tell him it wasn't that bad, wanted someone to ease his guilt. Sean refused to provide that comfort. Instead, he filed the letter with the rest of his documentary research. Evidence of what happened when privilege met accountability, when decades of exploitation finally came due. Mercedes returned from Europe in August, transformed. She carried herself differently. Confident, self-assured, no longer the girl who'd needed her father's constant reassurance. She was becoming the woman she was meant to be. I got offered a recording contract, she announced over dinner their first night back. 3 albums, full creative control, advance big enough to pay off your debt from the divorce. Sean's throat tightened. Mercedes, that's your money. It's our money. You invested in me. I'm returning the investment with interest. They argued about it for an hour, but Mercedes was immovable. She'd already spoken with her agent and her attorney. The advance would clear Sean's remaining debt and establish a fund for his documentary work. You gave me everything, Mercedes said. Let me give something back. In September, Mercedes started her sophomore year at Juilliard. Sean's documentary won awards at 3 major film festivals. The workshop series for estranged families expanded nationwide. The follow-up documentary series entered production. Life moved forward. 2 years after walking out of that family dinner, Sean and Mercedes had built something the Herreras could never understand. A relationship based on mutual respect, unconditional support, and authentic love. Doris sent one final message, via an attorney, demanding that Sean and Mercedes sign non-disparagement agreements and stop publicly humiliating the family. Sean's attorney responded with a single sentence. The truth is not disparagement. They never heard from the Herreras again. On Mercedes' 20th birthday, Sean gave her a gift, the original college fund account book, showing every deposit over 16 years. She held it like the treasure it was, tears streaming down her face. This is your real inheritance, Sean said. Not the money, that's gone, spent on your education, but the proof that you were worth every sacrifice. I'm going to keep this forever, Mercedes whispered. Good. And someday, when you have children of your own, you'll understand what it meant to make those deposits. Not the financial sacrifice, but the emotional investment. That's the inheritance that matters. Mercedes performed at Carnegie Hall that winter, her first major solo concert. Sean sat in the audience surrounded by industry professionals, critics, and fans who'd followed her journey from that viral showcase performance. The program included her Inheritance Concerto, revised and expanded into a full symphony. As she played, Sean thought about the Herreras, wherever they were, hearing about this moment secondhand or not at all. He felt no triumph over their downfall, no joy in their suffering. Only profound gratitude that he'd walked away when he did, that he'd chosen his daughter over their money, that he'd valued love over comfort. The symphony ended to thunderous applause. Mercedes took her bows, then looked directly at Sean in the audience and mouthed, "Thank you." He mouthed back, "I love you." In the lobby afterward, a young woman approached Sean nervously. "Mr. Ferguson? I'm Cassandra Herrera." Sean recognized her from photos, though she looked different now. Healthier, happier, no longer carrying the weight of impossible expectations. "I saw Mercedes perform tonight," Cassandra continued. "I wanted to thank you both. Your documentary, her performance, the whole story, it saved my life. I was so deep in my parents' programming that I couldn't see any other path. You showed me there was another way. I'm glad you found your way out," Sean said. "I'm in therapy now, working through 2 decades of conditional love and performance pressure. It's hard, but I'm getting there." Cassandra hesitated. "I know my family destroyed yours. I know there's no making that right. But I wanted you to know that some good came from it. You saved more than just Mercedes. You saved me too." She walked away before Sean could respond, disappearing into the crowd. Mercedes appeared at his elbow, flushed with success. Was that Cassandra? Yeah. What did she want? To say thank you. For showing her she could be free. Mercedes was quiet for a moment. "You know what's funny? Grandmother wanted Cassandra to be a neurosurgeon. She wanted me to be nothing. And now Cassandra's happy making coffee, and I'm playing Carnegie Hall. Life has a sense of humor, Sean agreed. They left the concert hall together, stepping into the New York night. The city glittered with possibility, with futures being written in real time, with second chances and new beginnings. The Herreras had tried to steal Mercedes's future. Instead, they taught her the most valuable lesson she'd ever learn, that the people who truly love you want you to succeed on your terms, not theirs. And that inheritance, the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally, supported completely, believed in absolutely, was worth more than all the money in all the world. Sean Ferguson had saved $127,000 over 16 years for his daughter's education. He'd lost half of it to divorce lawyers and fighting for what was his. But the real investment wasn't the money. It was the faith, the belief, the unwavering certainty that Mercedes Ferguson deserved every opportunity, every chance, every moment of support. That investment paid dividends that would compound for generations. In Mercedes's success, in Cassandra's liberation, in the thousands of people who watched the documentary and found the courage to choose themselves over toxic families. The Herreras had demanded Sean hand over his daughter's future because they thought they knew better, thought they deserved more, thought privilege entitled them to everything. They learned, too late, that the only thing privilege entitled them to was a front-row seat to their own irrelevance. When the phone finally rang, when Doris called 2 years after that dinner, crying about how unfair it all was, Sean didn't answer. He let Mercedes answer. And what she said destroyed them more thoroughly than any revenge could have. You taught me that family is about conditions and transactions. My father taught me that love is unconditional. I know which lesson I'm keeping. Goodbye, grandmother. She hung up and blocked the number. Some inheritances are worth keeping. Others deserve to be rejected, refused, returned to sender. Mercedes Ferguson knew the difference. And that knowledge, more than any Juilliard degree or Carnegie Hall performance, was the true measure of her father's success. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.